Kneel. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. It wasn't a request. It was a command barked by a man whose suit cost more than most people earn in a decade. In the center of New York's most exclusive restaurant, a young waitress stood frozen, tears stinging her eyes, staring down at a wine stain on a polished leather shoe. The room went dead silent. The wealthy man thought he had all the power. He thought she was nobody. He was about to demand she lick the wine from his shoe. But he didn't know that the glass doors behind him were opening. He didn't know that the man walking in wasn't just a billionaire, he was the one person in the world this tyrant feared most. And he certainly didn't know that the waitress was his daughter. The Obsidian Lounge isn't just a restaurant. It is a filtration system for New York City's elite. Located on the 60th floor of the shadowed Sterling Spire in Manhattan, it offers a view of Central Park that makes the rest of the world look like a chaotic ant farm. Up here, the air smells of chilled orchids, aged mahogany, and old money. The lighting is always dim, designed to hide wrinkles and illicit affairs. For Taylor Bennett, the Obsidian Lounge was a battlefield. At 24 years old, Taylor possessed the kind of beauty that was easily overlooked because she worked hard to hide it. Her uniform was a size too big, a deliberate choice to avoid the wandering hands of the clientele, and her honey blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, tight bun. She wore no makeup, just the exhaustion of double shifts and the weight of a secret she had carried for 3 years. Table 14 needs a refresh on the sparkling water, Taylor. And for God's sake, smile. You look like you're at a funeral, hissed Gregory, the floor manager. Gregory was a man who greased his hair back so severely it pulled his eyebrows up, giving him a permanent look of disdain. He treated the staff like livestock and the customers like deities. Yes, Gregory, Taylor murmured, grabbing a chilled crystal pitcher. She moved through the dining room with the practiced grace of a ghost. That was the job. Be present enough to serve, but invisible enough not to exist. She poured water, crumbed tables, and folded napkins, her mind drifting to the stack of medical bills sitting on her kitchen counter in Queens. Her mother, Martha, was in the late stages of renal failure. The treatments were bleeding them dry. That was why Taylor was here. That was why she swallowed her pride every night. And that was why she had walked away from a life that would have paid these bills with the swipe of a black card. "Did you hear?" whispered Chloe, another waitress, as they passed each other near the service station. "Preston Sterling is coming in tonight." Taylor's blood ran cold. The pitcher in her hand trembled slightly. "Preston? Are you sure?" The reservation just popped up. Table 1, the corner booth. He's bringing some entourage. God help us all. Preston Sterling. The name alone was enough to make the staff of the Obsidian Lounge develop ulcers. He was 32, the heir to the Sterling hedge fund empire, and a man who treated cruelty like a spectator sport. He was known for tipping zero if the ice cubes clinked too loudly, for snapping his fingers at staff like they were dogs, and for ruining careers on a whim. But for Taylor, the name meant something else. It meant a past she had buried. "I can't serve table 1, Taylor said, her voice tight. "Chloe, please, swap sections with me. I'll take the patio. I'll do your closing shift for a week." Chloe looked at her, confused. "Are you crazy? The patio is freezing tonight. Plus, Sterling drops thousands on wine. The auto gratuity alone." "I don't care about the money," Taylor pleaded, clutching Chloe's arm. "Please." Fine, Chloe sighed, shaking her head. "But you owe me big time. I'm not dealing with the patio wind for free." Taylor exhaled, her shoulders dropping. She thought she was safe. She thought she could hide in the shadows of the patio, away from the center stage. She was wrong. At 8:15 p.m., the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Conversations lulled. Necks craned. Preston Sterling walked in. He was a handsome man in the way a shark is handsome, sleek, sharp, and terrifying. He wore a navy bespoke suit that fit him like a second skin, a Patek Philippe watch on his wrist that gleamed under the chandeliers, and a smirk that suggested he owned everything his eyes touched. Flanking him were 2 junior associates, sycophants named Brad and Tyler, who laughed too hard at everything Preston said, and a woman on his arm. She was stunning, wearing a red dress that was barely legal, looking bored and expensive. Mr. Sterling. Gregory, the manager, practically sprinted to the host stand, bowing so low it was embarrassing. Welcome back to the Obsidian. We have table 1 prepared for you, the best view in the house. Preston didn't even look at him. He handed his coat to a passing busboy without checking if the boy was ready to take it, letting the cashmere drop into the kid's fumbling hands. The view is irrelevant, Gregory, Preston said, his voice a smooth baritone that carried across the quiet room. I'm here for the 82 Margot. Tell the sommelier to decant it now. I don't want to wait. Immediately, sir. Right this way. As the group moved toward the prime corner booth, Preston stopped. His eyes, cold and predatory, scanned the room. He wasn't looking for the view. He was looking for flaws. He was looking for someone to torment, to establish his dominance for the evening. His gaze swept past the bar, past the piano player, and landed on the glass doors leading to the patio. Taylor was there, her back turned, adjusting a heat lamp. Actually, Preston said, raising a hand. Change of plans. Table 1 is too stuffy. We'll sit on the patio. Gregory froze. Sir, it's quite brisk outside tonight. The wind coming off the Hudson. Did I ask for a weather report? Preston snapped. I want to smoke my cigar. Put us on the patio. Now. Taylor felt the vibration of footsteps approaching the glass doors. She turned around, praying to disappear. But there was nowhere to go. The doors opened. The cold wind rushed in, but it was nothing compared to the chill radiating from Preston Sterling as he stepped onto the terrace. He looked right at her. For a second, Taylor thought he recognized her. She thought he saw the little girl from the Hampton summers, the teenager from the galas. But his eyes glazed over. To him, she wasn't a person. She was a prop. You, Preston pointed a manicured finger at her face. Move that heater closer and get this table wiped. It looks filthy. It was spotless. But Taylor didn't argue. She kept her head down, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Yes, sir, she whispered. She wiped the pristine glass table. She moved the heater. She became the servant he wanted. She thought if she just stayed quiet, she would survive the night. She had no idea that Preston Sterling was in a mood for blood. By 9 p.m., the patio table had consumed 3 bottles of wine. The volume of their laughter had risen to a level that was disturbing the guests inside, but no one dared to hush Preston Sterling. Taylor was running on adrenaline. She had managed to serve the appetizers and the main course without making eye contact. She was essentially a pair of floating hands, placing plates and refilling glasses. So then I told the SEC regulator, Preston bellowed, leaning back in his chair, swirling the dark red liquid in his glass. I said, Buddy, my father plays golf with your boss's boss. If you audit me, you'll be checking tax returns in Alaska by Monday. The table erupted in laughter. The sycophants pounded the table. The woman in the red dress giggled, looking at Preston with hungry eyes. You're terrible, Preston, she cooed. I'm untouchable, babe. There's a difference, he grinned, taking a drag of a thick Cuban cigar. The smoke drifted into Taylor's face as she approached to clear the plates. She held her breath, trying not to cough. Excuse me, she murmured softly, reaching for an empty plate near Preston's elbow. It happened in slow motion. Preston was in the middle of a grand gesture, his arms expanding to emphasize the size of his ego. As Taylor reached in, he jerked his arm back violently to ash his cigar. His elbow connected hard with Taylor's wrist. The bottle of Chateau Margaux 1982, which she was holding in her other hand to refill his glass, slipped. Taylor gasped, trying to catch it. She fumbled. The heavy glass bottle hit the edge of the table, shattered, and exploded. Red wine, dark, rich, and sticky, erupted like a geyser. It didn't just hit the floor. It drenched the white tablecloth. It splattered across the face of the woman in the red dress. But worst of all, a massive wave of the vintage wine cascaded directly onto Preston Sterling's lap and down to his bespoke Italian leather shoes. The sound of shattering glass was followed by a silence so absolute it felt like the air had been sucked out of the universe. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The dark red liquid dripped from the tablecloth onto the stone floor with a rhythmic drip, drip, drip. Taylor stood paralyzed, her hands shaking, her face draining of all color. I. Preston slowly looked down at his lap. He touched the wet fabric of his trousers. He looked at his shoes, Berluti Oxfords, custom made in Paris, now soaked in $5,000 wine. When he looked up, his face wasn't red with anger. It was pale with a cold, sociopathic fury. It was the look of a man who wasn't going to yell. He was going to destroy. "You stupid cow," the woman in the red dress shrieked, jumping up and dabbing at her dress. "Look what you did." Gregory, the manager, burst onto the patio, his face a mask of horror. "Mr. Sterling. Oh my God. Towels. Someone get towels. Now." Busboys rushed in, swarming the table. But Preston didn't move. He didn't wipe the wine off. He just stared at Taylor. "Get away from me," Preston said to the busboys. His voice was dangerously low. The busboys froze and backed away. Preston stood up slowly. He towered over Taylor. He was 6'2", and she was barely 5'5". "Do you know," Preston whispered, leaning in so close she could smell the cognac and tobacco on his breath, "how much these shoes cost?" I'm so sorry, sir," Taylor stammered, tears spilling over. "It was an accident. You bumped my arm. I didn't mean." "I bumped your arm?" Preston repeated, his voice rising. "I bumped your arm?" He laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. He turned to his friends. "Did you hear that? The help is blaming me." "She's lying, Preston," Brad sneered. "She dropped it. Clumsy idiot." "I saw it," the woman hissed. "She threw it at you." Preston turned back to Taylor. The amusement was gone. His eyes were dead. "This suit is an Armani Privé. These shoes are Berluti. You just destroyed about $12,000 worth of property. And that's not including the wine, which you just wasted." I'll pay for the cleaning," Taylor cried. "Please. I'll do whatever." "You'll pay?" Preston mocked her. He looked her up and down with sneering disgust. "Look at you. You're wearing shoes from Payless and a uniform that smells like grease. You couldn't pay for the laces on my shoes if you worked here for 100 years. Gregory stepped in, trembling. "Mr. Sterling, please. We will comp the entire meal. We will pay for the suit. I will fire her immediately. Just please. Let's go inside and get you cleaned up." "Firing her isn't enough," Preston said. He wasn't looking at Gregory. He was locked onto Taylor. He wanted more than her job. He wanted her dignity. He wanted to feel big by making her feel small. It was a sickness he had carried his whole life, fed by a bank account that had never heard the word no. "She ruined my night," Preston said. "And she ruined my shoes. The leather is stained." He took a step back and pointed at the floor. "You said you'd do whatever, right?" Preston asked, a wicked smile curling his lips. Taylor nodded, terrified. "Yes. Anything." Preston pointed at his wine-soaked shoe. "Clean it." Taylor blinked, confused. She looked around for a towel. I'll get a cloth." "No," Preston interrupted. "No cloth." He pointed to the ground. "On your knees." The wind on the patio seemed to stop. The sounds of the city below the sirens, the honking cabs faded into a dull hum. Inside the restaurant, guests were pressing their faces against the glass, watching the drama unfold like a reality TV show. Phones were out. People were recording. Taylor felt like the floor was tilting. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Preston said, his voice loud enough for the entire patio to hear. "You are clumsy, you are stupid, and you are dirty. You made a mess. Now you're going to clean it up like the animal you are." He tapped the toe of his shoe. "Kneel down and lick it clean." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Even the sycophant Brad looked uncomfortable. Preston, maybe that's a bit much." "Shut up, Brad," Preston snapped. He didn't break eye contact with Taylor. She said she'd do anything. Let's see if her word is worth anything. Or is she just a liar like the rest of her kind? Taylor looked at Gregory. She pleaded with her eyes. "Help me. You're the manager. You can't let this happen." Gregory looked at Preston Sterling, the man who spent $50,000 a year at this restaurant. Then he looked at Taylor, the girl he paid $9 an hour. Gregory looked away. He fixed his gaze on a potted plant in the corner. Taylor, he muttered, his voice weak. Just resolve the customer's complaint. Taylor felt something inside her break. It wasn't her heart. It was her faith in humanity. The manager was throwing her to the wolves. I won't do that, Taylor said. Her voice was shaking, but it was audible. Preston's eyes widened. He wasn't used to resistance. What did you say to me? I said I won't do that, Taylor repeated, louder this time. She stood up straighter. I apologized. It was an accident. I will not degrade myself for your amusement. Preston's face turned a shade of violent red. He stepped forward, invading her personal space, using his height to intimidate her. You listen to me, you little piece of trash, he hissed. Do you know who I am? I can make a phone call and have you blacklisted from every job in this city. I can have the police here in 5 minutes and charge you with destruction of property and assault. Do you have a lawyer? Do you have money for bail? Taylor thought of her mother. She thought of the dialysis appointment tomorrow. If she was arrested, if she lost this job, her mother's treatment would stop. They would lose the apartment. Preston saw the fear in her eyes. He smelled it. That's what I thought, he sneered. You're nobody. You have no leverage. Now, drop to your knees, or I swear to God, I will ruin your entire miserable life. He pulled out his phone. I'm dialing the precinct right now. Captain Miller owes me a favor. The threat was real. In this city, money was the law. Preston Sterling could ruin her with a text message. Taylor felt the hot tears streaming down her cheeks. Every fiber of her being screamed to slap him, to run, to scream. But the image of her mother's pale face in the hospital bed held her feet to the floor. Slowly, agonizingly, Taylor bent her knees. The people watching gasped. Some turned away in shame. Others zoomed in with their cameras. Taylor's knees hit the cold stone of the patio floor. The pain was sharp, but the humiliation was a dull, heavy ache in her chest. Preston laughed. It was a triumphant, ugly sound. See? I told you. Everyone has a price. Even the trash. He extended his foot toward her face. The wine smelled sour and sharp. Go on, he commanded. Get it clean. Taylor closed her eyes. She was about to do the unthinkable. She was about to surrender the last shred of her dignity to a monster in a bespoke suit. But just as she leaned forward, a sound cut through the tension. It was the sound of the main restaurant doors, the heavy double mahogany doors at the very front of the obsidian lounge being thrown open with a force that rattled the hinges. The noise was so loud that everyone, even Preston, turned to look. The restaurant usually buzzed with low chatter. Now, it went instantly silent. A man had walked in. He was flanked by 4 large men in black suits who wore earpieces, private security, military grade. But they weren't the focus. The focus was the man in the center. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and a beard that was neatly trimmed. He wore a black trench coat over a tuxedo. He walked with a cane, not because he needed it, but because it looked like a scepter. His face was hard, etched with the kind of lines that come from making decisions that change the course of nations. His eyes were blue steel, cold and piercing. It was Arthur van der Hoven. The room seemed to shrink. Arthur van der Hoven wasn't just rich. He was wealth. He was the kind of money that bought politicians, owned media empires, and built cities. He was the owner of the building they were standing in. In fact, he owned the bank that held Preston Sterling's trust fund. Preston's jaw dropped. His arrogance evaporated instantly. He forgot about the waitress at his feet. Mr. van der Hoven, Preston exclaimed, his voice cracking. He quickly adjusted his jacket, trying to cover the wine stain. What an honor. I didn't know you were dining here tonight. I'm Preston Sterling. My father is. Arthur van der Hoven didn't even look at Preston. He walked straight through the restaurant, his cane clicking rhythmically on the floor. He walked past the terrified manager. He walked past the bar. He walked straight onto the patio. Preston stepped forward, hand extended, a desperate, sycophantic smile plastered on his face. Sir, I'm huge admirer. If you'd like to join us, We have. Arthur walked right past Preston, as if he were a ghost. He didn't shake the hand. He didn't acknowledge his existence. Arthur stopped directly in front of Taylor, who was still kneeling on the floor, trembling, her head bowed in shame. The entire restaurant held its breath. Arthur stared down at the kneeling waitress. His expression was unreadable. Then, slowly, his hard face softened. His eyes filled with an emotion that looked terrifyingly like heartbreak. He dropped his cane. It clattered loudly on the floor. The billionaire sank to his knees. He didn't care about his tuxedo. He didn't care about the wine on the floor. He knelt right there in front of her, bringing himself to her level. "Taylor?" he whispered, his voice shaking with a tenderness that shocked everyone in the room. Taylor slowly lifted her head. Her eyes met his. "Daddy?" she choked out. The silence on the patio was no longer just the absence of noise. It was a physical weight, pressing down on everyone's chest. The wind off the Hudson River howled, rattling the glass panes. But inside the terrace, time had stopped. Preston Sterling stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, his brain failing to process the visual data in front of him. The great Arthur van der Hoeven, the man whose biography Preston had read in business school, the man whose net worth was higher than the GDP of some small countries, was on his knees. And he was holding the hands of the waitress Preston had just ordered to lick his shoe. "Daddy?" Taylor whispered again, her voice cracking under the strain of 3 years of silence. Arthur reached up with a trembling hand and cupped her face. His thumb brushed away a tear that had cut a track through the cheap foundation she wore. "I found you," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "I have had private investigators scouring the globe from London to Tokyo. I looked in palaces. I looked in universities." He looked at her stained apron, her worn-out shoes, and the red marks on her wrist where Preston had struck her. "I never thought to look here. I didn't want to be found," Taylor said softly, pulling back slightly. "Mom, she's sick, Dad, really sick." "I know," Arthur said. "I know everything now. The investigators found Martha's medical records yesterday morning in a clinic in Queens. That's how I found you. I came straight here." He looked at her with an intensity that made the surrounding crowd feel like intruders. "Why didn't you call? I would have sent a jet. I would have bought the hospital. Taylor, why did you let yourself suffer like this?" "Because I'd rather scrub floors than live in that cage you built for us," she said, a flash of her old fire returning. "I wanted to be free." "Free?" Arthur looked at the wine puddle on the floor. He looked at the way she was kneeling. "Is this what freedom looks like to you? Kneeling in the dirt for a boy who isn't fit to hold your coat?" Taylor looked down, shame flooding her face again. Arthur's expression shifted. The tenderness vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. He gripped Taylor's arms and gently, but firmly, pulled her to her feet. He stood up with her, rising to his full height. He took off his tuxedo jacket. With deliberate, slow movements, he draped it over Taylor's shoulders. It engulfed her small frame, smelling of expensive cologne and power. "Button it," he commanded gently. "You are a van der Hoeven. You do not shiver in front of these people." Taylor fumbled with the buttons, her hands shaking. Arthur turned around. The transformation was instantaneous. The heartbroken father was gone. In his place stood the Titan of Wall Street, the Wolf of Fifth Avenue. Arthur scanned the patio. His eyes swept over the shocked diners, the terrified staff, and finally, they locked onto Preston Sterling. Preston was currently trying to make himself invisible. He had stepped back, hiding half his body behind the woman in the red dress, who looked equally terrified. "Mr. van der Hoeven," Preston squeaked, his voice an octave higher than usual. I honestly had no idea. She was working under a pseudonym. If I had known she was your daughter, obviously, the protocol would have been different." Arthur didn't speak. He just walked forward, step by step. The sound of his dress shoes on the stone floor was like the ticking of a bomb. The 4 bodyguards in black suits moved with him, forming a perimeter that blocked all exits. Arthur stopped 2 feet from Preston. He looked at the wine stain on Preston's shoe. Then he looked at Preston's face. "You told her to kneel," Arthur said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with a tone so flat it was terrifying. It was a misunderstanding, Preston babbled, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. We were just joking. It was a joke, right, Brad? He looked at his friend for support. Brad, realizing the ship was sinking, took a step away from Preston. I didn't say anything, Preston. This was all you. A joke, Arthur repeated. He tilted his head. You ordered my daughter the heiress to the Van der Hoeven empire, the future chairwoman of the very bank that holds your mortgage to lick wine off your shoe. As a joke? I was drunk, Preston pleaded. It's the alcohol. Sir, look, I'll apologize. Taylor Miss Van der Hoeven, I am so sorry. Seriously. Let me pay for the dry cleaning. Give me your shoe, Arthur said. Preston blinked. What? You were very concerned about your shoe, Arthur said calmly. Give it to me. Sir, I don't understand. Arthur snapped his fingers. Two of the security guards moved. They didn't run, they blurred. In less than a second, they had Preston by the arms. Hey, get off me. Do you know who my father is? Preston screamed, thrashing. My father is Richard Sterling. He's a senator. Your father, Arthur said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a silk handkerchief, is a man who has been begging me for a loan extension for the last 6 months to keep his firm solvent. A loan that I was considering approving. Until tonight, Arthur nodded to the guards. They kicked Preston's legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, landing on his knees in the exact spot where Taylor had been moments before. Please, Preston sobbed, don't hurt me. I don't need to hurt you physically, boy, Arthur said with disdain. I'm going to hurt you in the only place that matters to people like you. Arthur leaned down and grabbed the Berluti shoe. He yanked it off Preston's foot, leaving the man with one shoe and a wine-soaked sock. Arthur held the shoe up to the light, inspecting the stain. You valued this piece of leather more than a human being's dignity, Arthur mused. He walked over to the edge of the balcony, which overlooked the street 60 stories below. No, no, no. Those are custom, Preston cried. Arthur dropped the shoe. They watched it fall, spiraling down into the darkness of the Manhattan night. Arthur turned back to Preston. Now, let's talk about the apology. The patio was now a courtroom, and Arthur Van der Hoeven was judge, jury, and executioner. He walked back to where Taylor stood. She was still trembling, clutching the lapels of his oversized tuxedo jacket. The staff was huddled in the corner. Gregory, the manager, looked like he was about to faint. Arthur put an arm around Taylor's shoulder. 3 years ago, he addressed the room, his voice projecting clearly. My daughter left home. She left a life of billions because she believed that money made people cruel. She believed that wealth rotted the soul. I told her she was wrong. I told her that money was just a tool, and that good people remained good, regardless of their bank account. He gestured to Preston, who was shivering on the floor, held down by the guards. I spent 3 years thinking she was naive, Arthur continued. But tonight, I walk in here, and I see this. I see a man who has everything, education, privilege, status, using it to crush a girl he thought had nothing. Arthur looked down at Taylor. You were right, honey. I was wrong. He turned his gaze to Gregory. You? Arthur pointed. The manager. Gregory squeaked. Yes, Mr. Van der Hoeven. You stood there, Arthur said, his voice rising in volume. You stood there and watched a customer abuse your employee. You watched him humiliate her, and you did nothing. Sir, the policy, the customer is always. The customer is a guest in my building. Arthur roared, the sound echoing off the glass walls. This building belongs to me. This restaurant leases the space from me. And part of that lease agreement includes a clause about the ethical treatment of staff. A clause I wrote personally. Arthur pulled out his phone. He didn't dial a number. He pressed a speed dial. Jenkins, Arthur said into the phone, his eyes never leaving Gregory's face. Terminate the lease for the Obsidian Lounge. Effective immediately. Yes, tonight. Activate the penalty clauses for breach of contract. And call the licensing board. Tell them I want their liquor license pulled for serving visibly intoxicated minors. He's 32, Gregory protested weakly. He acts like a child. He gets treated like a child, Arthur snapped. He hung up the phone. You have 1 hour to vacate the premises before I have the locks changed. You're fired. All of you who stood by and watched, you're fired. A wail of despair went up from the staff. But Arthur ignored it. He focused back on Preston. Preston was now sobbing openly. Mr. Vanderhoven, please. My father. He'll kill me if you pull the loan. Please, I'll do anything. I'll lick the floor. I'll do what I told her to do. It was a pathetic sight. The arrogance was completely gone, revealed to be nothing more than a thin coat of paint over a coward's soul. Taylor stepped forward. She placed a hand on Arthur's chest. Dad, she said softly. Stop. Arthur looked at her. Stop? Taylor, he treated you like an animal. He deserves to be destroyed. He's already destroyed, Taylor said, looking at Preston with a mixture of pity and disgust. Look at him. He's crying over a shoe and alone. He's empty, Dad. If you destroy him completely, you're just proving that you're the monster I ran away from. The room went silent again. This was the dynamic that had driven them apart. The ruthless billionaire father and the compassionate, moralist daughter. Arthur looked at Preston, then at Taylor. He saw the strength in her eyes. She wasn't asking for mercy for Preston. She was asking for mercy for Arthur's soul. She didn't want her father to be a bully, even in her defense. Arthur sighed, the tension leaving his shoulders. You have your mother's heart, Taylor. It's a dangerous thing to have in this city. He signaled to the guards. Let him up. The guards released Preston. The young man scrambled to his feet, hopping on one shoe, wiping snot from his nose. Get out of my sight, Arthur said quietly. But before you go, you have a bill to settle. I'll pay it, Preston stammered, reaching for his wallet. The wine, the dinner, everything. Not the dinner, Arthur said. The labor. Arthur pointed to the shattered glass and the pool of wine. You made the mess, Arthur said. My daughter is off the clock. She isn't cleaning it. The janitors aren't cleaning it. He pointed to a mop bucket sitting in the corner of the patio service station. Clean it up. Preston stared at him. You want me to mop? I want you to learn the value of work, Arthur said. If that floor isn't spotless in 10 minutes, I make the call to pull your father's loan, and I will ensure that the video from the security cameras of you assaulting a waitress goes viral by morning. You'll be unhireable. Preston looked at the guests recording him. He looked at the woman in the red dress, who was now pretending she didn't know him. Defeated, Preston Sterling hobbled over to the corner. He picked up the mop. The entire restaurant watched in stunned silence as the billionaire's son, the master of the universe, awkwardly dipped a mop into soapy water and began to scrub the floor. He missed spots. He splashed water on his suit pants. He looked ridiculous. You missed a spot, Taylor said quietly. Preston looked up at her. For a moment, there was hate in his eyes, but it was quickly extinguished by fear. He moved the mop to where she pointed. Good, Arthur said. He turned his back on Preston, dismissing him as if he were furniture. Arthur took Taylor's hand. Come on. We're leaving. I can't just leave, Taylor said, looking at the chaos. My locker. My things. We will buy you new things, Arthur said, leading her toward the exit. We are going to the hospital, Taylor. We're going to see Martha. And this time, she's going to get the best doctors in the world. No more hiding. As they walked through the main dining room, the guests parted like the Red Sea. No one spoke. No one ate. They just watched the father and daughter, one in a tuxedo, one in a stained waitress uniform covered by a tuxedo jacket, walk out the front door. But just as they reached the elevator, Taylor stopped. Wait, she said. What is it? Arthur asked, worried she was changing her mind. Taylor turned back. She walked over to the table where Chloe, her fellow waitress, was standing, looking terrified that she was about to be fired along with everyone else. Taylor took Chloe's hands. You traded sections with me, Taylor said. You tried to save me from him. I didn't do enough, Chloe whispered. I'm so sorry, Taylor. I had no idea. You were the only friend I had here, Taylor said. She turned to her father. Dad? Arthur nodded, understanding immediately. He pulled a business card from his pocket, a black titanium card with just a phone number on it. He handed it to Chloe. Call this number tomorrow morning, Arthur said. My executive assistant is looking for a junior protege. Starting salary is $80,000, plus benefits. You'll need to go to night school, but we'll pay for it. Chloe's jaw dropped. Me? Loyalty is a rare currency, Arthur said. Taylor trusts you. That's enough for me. He turned back to his daughter. Ready? Taylor looked at the restaurant one last time. She looked at the fake smiles, the expensive wine, and the mop moving back and forth on the patio. Yeah, she said. I'm ready. The elevator doors closed, sealing them off from the Obsidian Lounge forever. But the story didn't end there. Because when you humiliate a Sterling, they don't just mop the floor and go home. They plot. The morning after the incident at the Obsidian Lounge, the sun rose over New York City. But for the Sterling family, it was the beginning of a long, dark winter. Taylor sat in a private waiting room at Mount Sinai Hospital. The room was nicer than her entire apartment. It had plush beige sofas, fresh coffee, and a view of the East River. But Taylor couldn't focus on the luxury. She was focused on the double doors down the hall, where a team of nephrology specialists flown in overnight from Switzerland on Arthur's private jet were operating on her mother, Martha. Arthur van der Hoven sat opposite her, reading the Wall Street Journal on a tablet. He looked calm, but Taylor noticed his foot tapping rhythmically against the floor, a nervous tic she hadn't seen since she was a child. She's strong, Taylor, Arthur said, without looking up. Martha was always the strongest of us. She put up with me for 20 years. A kidney transplant is a walk in the park compared to that. Taylor managed a weak smile. Why didn't you tell me you knew where we were? You said you found the medical records yesterday, but you arrived so fast. Arthur set the tablet down. He looked older in the daylight, the fluorescent hospital lights highlighting the deep grooves of regret on his face. I found you 6 months ago, Taylor. Taylor froze. What? I found you working at a diner in Queens before you moved to the Obsidian, Arthur admitted softly. I drove past your apartment building a dozen times. I watched you carry groceries in the rain, and you didn't stop to help? Taylor's voice rose, anger flaring. Mom was suffering, and you just watched? I was afraid, Arthur whispered. The Titan of Wall Street looked down at his hands. I was afraid that if I tried to buy my way back into your life, you would run again. You said you wanted independence. I was trying to respect that. I was waiting for you to come to me. But when I saw the medical reports, when I saw Martha was dying, I couldn't wait anymore. Before Taylor could respond, the tranquility of the private lounge was shattered. The heavy oak doors swung open. It wasn't a doctor. It was Senator Richard Sterling. Preston's father was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that built politicians. He had silver hair, a fake tan, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him trailed Preston, who was wearing sunglasses to hide his swollen eyes, and a team of 3 lawyers carrying briefcases like weapons. Arthur, the senator boomed, his voice filling the room. We need to talk. Now? Arthur didn't stand up. He simply crossed his legs and picked up his coffee cup. Richard, you're interrupting a family moment. Get out. Your daughter, Senator Sterling, pointed a shaking finger at Taylor. Assaulted my son last night. She humiliated him. And then you breached a commercial lease and slandered a private citizen. Do you have any idea the PR storm you've caused? I imagine the PR storm is quite bad for you, Richard, Arthur said calmly. Considering the video of your son ordering a woman to lick his shoe has already been viewed 4 million times on Twitter. Context, the senator shouted. It was a joke taken out of context. And now, thanks to your little stunt, my son is being harassed. We are filing a lawsuit for defamation of character, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and unlawful termination of the Obsidian lease. We're suing you for $50 million. Preston stepped forward, emboldened by his father's presence. And we're going to win. You think you can just bully us because you have more money? My father is on the Senate Finance Committee. He can freeze your assets, pending an investigation into your bank's offshore holdings. We can tie up your accounts for months. Taylor felt the blood drain from her face. Freeze the assets? She asked. She looked at the operating room doors. If the accounts were frozen, the payments for the Swiss doctors, the specialized equipment, the post-op care, it could all be halted. That's right, sweetheart, Preston sneered, removing his sunglasses to reveal bloodshot eyes. You want to play the victim? We can play the game too. Drop the footage. Issue a public apology saying you were the one who was drunk and disorderly. Admit you provoked me. Do that, and maybe we don't destroy your mother's healthcare plan. It was a blackmail attempt so vile, so nakedly cruel, that Taylor couldn't speak. They were using her dying mother as leverage to save Preston's reputation. Arthur stood up slowly. He carefully placed his coffee cup on the saucer. Richard, Arthur said, his voice terrifyingly low. You are threatening my wife's life. Ex-wife, the senator corrected. And I'm just protecting my family. Something you should understand. Arthur walked over to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Do you know why I didn't crush your loan extension yesterday, Richard? Do you know why I let your family survive this long? Because you need my political influence, the senator scoffed. No, Arthur turned around. His eyes were cold, blue ice. Because I felt sorry for you. I knew your son was a failure, and I knew you were drowning in gambling debts in Atlantic City. I kept you afloat out of pity. Arthur reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a simple, folded piece of paper. He tossed it onto the coffee table. What is this? Preston asked, looking at the paper. That, Arthur said, is the deed to the Sterling family estate in the Hamptons, and the deed to your townhouse in D.C., and the promissory note for your campaign financing. The senator's face turned the color of ash. That's not possible. The bank holds those. I bought the bank this morning, Arthur said casually. At 6 a.m. I bought the regional holding company that finances your entire existence, Richard. The room went dead silent. The lawyers behind the senator looked at each other, realizing they were currently billing a client who technically had $0. Arthur walked up to Preston. He towered over him. You threatened to freeze my assets? Arthur laughed, a dark, humorless sound. Boy, I own the ice. Arthur turned to the senator. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to resign from the Senate immediately, citing health reasons. You are going to drop this lawsuit, and your son, Preston, is going to enlist. Enlist? Preston squeaked. In what? The military, Arthur said. Or the Peace Corps, or a monastery. I don't care. But he is going to leave New York, and he is going to learn discipline. If I see his face in this city again, I will call the note on your debts. You will be homeless by sunset. Senator Sterling looked at the paper on the table. He looked at his son. He realized he had walked into a lion's den, armed with a toothpick. Preston, the senator said, his voice defeated. Let's go. Dad? You can't be serious, Preston cried. Shut up, the senator roared, slapping his son across the back of the head. Shut up and walk. They turned and fled the room, the lawyers scrambling to keep up. Arthur watched them go, then exhaled a long breath he seemed to have been holding for years. He turned to Taylor. I promised you, Taylor, he said softly. No one hurts this family again. Just then, the double doors opened. The lead surgeon stepped out, pulling down his mask. He looked tired but was smiling. Mr. van der Hoven? Taylor rushed forward. Is she? The transplant was a complete success, the doctor said. The kidney is functioning perfectly. She's waking up now. 1 year later, the space that used to house the Obsidian Lounge was different now. The dark, brooding velvet curtains were gone. The pretentious, dimly lit atmosphere had been replaced by floor-to-ceiling windows that let the sunlight flood in. The sign above the door didn't say Obsidian anymore. It read, The Open Table. Inside, the restaurant was packed. But it wasn't just men in bespoke suits. There were families, tourists, and locals. The menu didn't have prices that required a credit check. It was high-quality food, accessible to real people. But the biggest difference was the staff. They were smiling. Genuine smiles. They moved with a rhythm that suggested they enjoyed their work. Taylor stood near the host stand, reviewing the reservation list. She looked different. The severe bun was gone, her honey blonde hair falling in loose waves. She wore a tailored blazer, professional but comfortable. She wasn't hiding anymore. "Boss!" a voice called out. Taylor turned to see Chloe, now the assistant general manager, rushing over with a tablet. "We have a problem with table 6, Chloe said, grinning. "What kind of problem?" "They want to thank the owner personally for the pay-what-you-can program," Chloe said. Taylor smiled. When she took over the space, she had instituted a policy. Every Monday, 10% of the tables were reserved for people who couldn't afford a meal. They were served the same menu, with the same dignity, for whatever they could pay, even if it was zero. "I'll go over in a minute," Taylor said. She felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see a woman in a wheelchair, looking frail but vibrant, her eyes bright and full of life. "Mom!" Taylor scolded gently. "You're supposed to be resting in the office." Martha laughed, patting Taylor's hand. "I spent 3 years dying, Taylor. I'm not going to spend my second chance sitting in a back office. Besides, the bread rolls need quality control." Martha looked healthy. Her skin had color. The dialysis port was a distant memory. "Your father is here," Martha whispered, nodding toward the entrance. Arthur van der Hoven stood in the doorway. He looked different, too. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo or a power suit. He was wearing a simple cashmere sweater and slacks. He held a cane, but he leaned on it less. Since the incident, Arthur had stepped down as CEO of his conglomerate, handing the reins to a board of directors so he could focus on legacy projects, mostly philanthropy, and mostly trying to make up for lost time with Martha. Taylor walked over to him. "Mr. van der Hoven," she teased. "Do you have a reservation? We're fully booked." "I know the owner," Arthur smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I hear she's tough, though." He looked around the bustling restaurant. "You did good, kid. You turned a place of exclusion into a place of community. I'm proud of you." "I had capital," Taylor said, acknowledging the truth. "It's easy to be generous when you have a safety net." "Capital is just fuel," Arthur corrected. "You provided the engine. You know, I heard about Preston." "Oh? He's in Nebraska," Arthur chuckled, "working as a farmhand. Apparently, he actually likes it. He sent me a letter, a real apology this time, no lawyers attached." "People can change," Taylor said. "Even Sterling's. Even van der Hoven's." Arthur nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I have something for you. It's not money." Taylor opened the box. Inside was a simple, silver pin in the shape of a feather. "It was your grandmother's," Arthur said. "She used to say that wealth is heavy, but kindness is light as a feather. I forgot that for a long time. You reminded me." Taylor pinned the silver feather to her lapel. It caught the afternoon sun, gleaming not with the aggressive shine of diamonds, but with the soft glow of history. "Table 6 is waiting," Martha called out from the dining room. Waving at them, Taylor linked her arm through her father's. "Come on, Dad. Let's go serve some dinner." As they walked into the dining room, nobody stopped to stare because they were billionaires. Nobody gasped in fear. They were just a family, walking through a room filled with laughter, the smell of fresh bread, and the undeniable warmth of a second chance. Taylor looked down at her shoes. They were practical, comfortable, and clean, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would never, ever kneel for anyone again unless it was to help them up. And that is the story of Taylor and the Obsidian Lounge. It's a powerful reminder that true class has nothing to do with the brand of your suit or the limit on your credit card. Preston Sterling had millions, but he was poor in spirit. Taylor had nothing but her dignity, and that made her richer than he could ever dream of being. In the end, the tables always turn. The person you kick on your way up might be the very person holding the keys when you fall down. Now, I have a question for you. If you were in Taylor's position, if you had the power to destroy Preston's life completely like her father wanted, would you have done it? Or would you have shown mercy like she did? Let me know your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life dramas about karma, justice, and the secrets of the ultra-rich, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, remember, stand tall,